Welcome to Tentpole Trauma, the podcast where we look at movies that came with hype and high hopes, but left with crushing disappointment, either critically, at the box office, or both. Freed from the weight of expectations, we seek to examine these underperformers under a new light, parsing through the good, the bad, and everything in between with the hopes of gaining a better understanding as to why they failed to find their audience. Warning, there will be spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie that we're discussing today, I suggest you stop the podcast and go watch it. Then when you come back and listen, you'll get more out of the discussion. On this episode, we discuss Howard the Duck. Okay, I am Sebastian, and I am here with Jennifer.
Hello.
And we are welcoming back to the podcast Josh Miller.
Woo!
Hello.
Yay!
Happy to be back talking about more wonderful cinema.
That's right. We needed you for this movie, and we'll get to that in a second. But for those who don't know, Josh is one of the hosts, or now the only host, of Friday Night Frights, LA's premiere horror.
You're still there in spirit.
I'm still there in spirit, but it's definitely LA's premiere horror screening series. He's also a co-host of Best Movies Never Made, which is a really awesome podcast about all those movies that didn't get made. I recently was listening to some of the James Bond ones because I was into James Bond. They had really good, comprehensive set of episodes about that. And he is one of the co-screenwriters of the movie, the hit film Sonic the Hedgehog.
Woo!
Another film about a cartoon character that an anamorphic creature from another dimension that comes into our realm. A more successful version than this film, I would say. So we wanted your unique insight into this kind of amazingly awesome, fucked up movie, which is
Howard the Duck.
Woo!
And I will say, just to interject there, when we were working on Sonic the Hedgehog, initially like breaking the story down, my writing partner Pat Casey and I would keep referencing Howard the Duck, not necessarily in a sense of like we wanted the movie to be like it, but our director Jeff Fowler, like that made him just so, I guess, superstitiously paranoid.
Uh-huh.
He was like, you guys have to stop referencing Howard the Duck.
well, and his name is Fowler too.
Yeah, that's true.
Here come the puns.
Yeah, that was the Voldemort of our writer's room. That was the movie that cannot be named.
Yes, I can kind of see why. I mean, it is sort of the, poster child for this sort of thing going terribly wrong and in a big way. A pitfall you thankfully avoided, but I mean, this is a weird fucking movie. Now, are you familiar, Josh, at all? Were you familiar with the Howard the Duck comic book character, the Marvel character?
I mean, a little more now. What the age I was when this came out, I had no idea of the comics, and I remember like, because I was like, this was a movie. I don't remember what station it would have been on, if it was HBO. I didn't have HBO when I was a kid, but I felt like this was a movie that was on TV a lot.
Yeah.
And at some point when I noticed the based on the Marvel Comics credit, I think like a lot of people who are only tangentially into comics, I thought of comics as superheroes.
Yeah.
So I was very confused by like, how is this movie based on a comic book?
Well, I was a comic book reader in the 70s and early 80s, the late 70s and early 80s, and Howard the Duck would appear in Marvel Comics semi-regularly. And I was not into Howard the Duck. Whenever he would show up in like Spider-Man or something, I'd be like, oh, it's gonna be a Howard the Duck issue because I just didn't jibe with that whole sort of idea. Howard the Duck was created by a guy named Steve Gerber. I don't want to say it's sort of like a post-hippie kind of thing. I feel like he kind of grew out of what's the guy who liked to draw the big butts?
I was gonna say the Crumbs, Fritz the cat,
Yeah.
like that kind of.
Yes.
Yeah, he was sort of like the kind of more sanitized for the kids sort of idea. Obviously, he, drew from Donald Duck and stuff, but I mean, the way he's depicted in the comics, which I'm sure you're aware of, is he's always has a cigar and he's got like a Trilby hat or whatever. He kind of looks like a news reporter or something like.
Well, and the few issues of his own like I'm actually more familiar with his own comics than like when he would appear in other Marvel comics. And I always got kind of, like a Fritz the Cat sort of, almost with a little bit of Cerebus the Aardvark of kind of going for that like kind of hip indie comic vibe. Because I just remember one of the few issues I ever saw that like was much like how Cerebus initially started, was almost kind of like a Conan the Barbarian sort of story where he found himself in having to rescue a princess or, and the kind of thing where it was, I'm sure, meant to be subversive at the time, but it gave me the vibe reading it, 30 years later, like when you read an old Mad magazine and you were like, this people would ban this from schools. Like now this magazine just seems like so G-rated and like cute. To what extent Howard ever really was that edgy, I don't know. I just know that like some older comics fans, like that was their jam.
He definitely has a fan base of like older dudes who were probably teenagers in the 70s. A generation older or half generation older than me. Now, Jen, were you aware at all of Howard the Duck before the movie?
Not at all.
The movie was your first exposure to Howard.
Yes, and Howard was on TV a lot. As Josh had mentioned, I think I saw him on HBO quite a bit, but I also recall renting the VHS from the video store. I can picture the cover perfectly. That was my first introduction to him, though. I had no idea about the Marvel connection when I first saw it.
I don't remember if I saw this in the theater, and we can get to it when we're talking about the movie, but it was a movie that I actually saw a lot. Like, it was just one of those movies that I felt I just saw a zillion times, whether it was beginning to end or just like watching some random chunk of it.
Same here.
Well, I can proudly boast that I did see it in the theater
Whoa.
upon its run. It's funny because it's hard for me to place exactly. I mean, obviously it was in 1986 when the movie came out, which, makes me a teenager. I don't like consciously remember deciding to go to Howard the Duck, and I don't remember if I must have gone with my friends. That would have been at the time when I'd be seeing movies with my friends and not my parents, but I definitely remember seeing it. I mean, how can you forget? I remember actually not hating it when I saw it. Like, I mean, it was like one of those experiences where you're old enough to know that what you're watching is like probably objectively bad and the humor's not really landing or whatever, but I just kind of appreciated the fact that it was this crazy movie with a like little person in a duck suit. Maybe I was high or something. I don't know. I can't remember, but I remember not hating it, sort of sitting there the whole time with sort of a bemused smirk, not quite sophisticated enough to know like what a holy fucking shit so bad it's good experience is, but at the same time recognizing that this was not probably anybody's idea of a good movie, but it kind of was my idea of a good time.
I was just going to say, I agree with Josh. Like, I saw this a lot, like between seeing it on TV and renting it. And I mean, I assume I liked it because I watched it or just it was on or whatever. Or like, I don't know if I saw it all the way through all the time, like same as Josh, like, just would catch bits of it here and there. But I felt like I was pretty familiar with it. And then watching it today, I was like, I don't remember so much of this. Like, it was just, I don't know. Like, I don't know if a lot of it was maybe going over my head. I mean, there's some things, and we'll get into it. There's some things that I definitely did remember, but then there was other parts that I was just like, what the heck? Like,
I realized because I watched it a zillion times as a kid, and like so many movies I feel you watch as a kid. at some point you burn out and then you essentially just never watch it again because
Yes.
it's kind of like you have
Yeah.
it memorized. And then I've seen it twice in adulthood. And the first time I watched it in adulthood, it was very disappointing because I convinced other people to watch it.
no.
Because my memory of it was, I was under the assumption that this was going to be one of those things where like they'd never seen it and they heard it was bad. And not like I thought it was going to be good, like The Shining good or something. But I was just like, this movie is going to deliver. And I was not prepared for the fact that it's actually very poorly paced in a lot of
Yeah.
parts. So then watching it now for the podcast, though, I kind of inverted on that and reappreciated it when I didn't have that just overwhelming feeling of everyone I'd made watch it just being like, why are you making us watch this? Which, by the way, used to happen to me a lot during the DVD era. I made people watch like Fantasia and The Dark Crystal, both of which are great movies,
Yes.
but those are other ones where people are just like, why are we, this is so boring.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm sorry, this was not a good, like, let's drink beer and watch at 11 p.m. on a Saturday movie.
But I would argue this movie is, I would say,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
if anything, I think this movie is imminently watchable. Like, once you put it on, you kind of don't want to take it off. Now, at the time, you guys probably don't remember, or maybe you do, but sort of the big marketing push for this was, from George Lucas.
Yeah.
His name was all over the promotional materials, although, I don't really know how much he had to do with it, but Jen, you did a little research on it, didn't you?
I did about the writers.
Right.
I'm not sure George Lucas's how much he
Well,
was
the
involved.
writers, it's what, William Hayek?
And Gloria
And Gloria
Katz.
Katz.
Yeah.
They're from like the Lucas stable.
Yes, they did. And that might be because they did American Graffiti.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's one of the films they're known for. And then they also they were husband and wife, and they also did Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Classic.
But what was the most interesting to me was
Yeah, I know what you're gonna say.
right that they were the writers of Messiah of Evil. Is that what you're gonna? Is that,
I think they directed that as well. I
That's
think they
right.
wrote and directed Messiah of Evil.
yeah, and had some small parts in it as well. Like the Gloria did at least. But yeah, I was like, whoa. That's something, because they did that, and then they did American Graffiti the same year, actually, 1973. So
That's kind of an awesome group of movies to be involved
Right?
with, honestly.
Yeah.
I think so too. No, I think it's awesome.
What a career.
Yeah, and then to exactly, and I love Temple of Doom.
I do
and
too.
I mean, I have love for this film too. So if I was a writer, I would have been stoked this was my filmography that I was attached to.
Dizzying highs and terrifying lows.
This is the exact kind of movie I would love, and I don't know if there is one out there, but I would love to watch one of those like old school DVD, like feature length talking head, behind the scenes documentaries on.
Totally.
I mean, obviously it's an interesting story, and I don't think it was like a disaster or something like Super Mario Brothers where just everything was going wrong. It
Yeah.
actually feels like a movie where mostly things were going right. It was just kind of certain aspects of it were maybe ill-conceived
Yes.
from the get-go, but because they had the George Lucas's name to slap on it, just no one was asking the right kinds of questions.
Yeah.
And it just
A phenomenon that has had continued through
Yes.
through the prequels, really.
But I would be curious, just like coming off the comics, and it's not like no movies were based on comics back then. There were still plenty of examples, but it was definitely not like now. We're just like, I feel like as long as something's based on a comic book that one person bought, like you can kind of get someone at some studio excited about it.
Yeah.
At the time, I don't know that anyone more than I feel like they would be judging it based on its content. Not that we can be like, oh, we can say from Marvel Comics,
Yeah.
just what it was about this idea and the movie it's going for. Because the one area I do feel it is a just objective failure, whether or not we subjectively enjoy watching it, is that it falls into that kind of ratings limbo of like, who was this
Yes.
for
Yes.
age-wise?
Yes.
Yes.
Because like so many 80s movies, and why being a kid in the 80s who have parents that like don't care what you watch was amazing.
Yes.
Because there were so many movies in the 80s aimed at adults that were like too stupid and goofy for adults to like. So most of them were bombs.
Uh-huh.
But all the kids who saw them loved them. And then they became like cult classics. And that's exactly what this movie is. It's like so like weird and doofy. But then there's like naked duck.
Oh yeah, we need to talk about it. We need to talk about all of this.
All of it.
Because it just goes through the whole movie. It's
Oh,
not just
man.
like a little bit here and there. You're like, no, this goes through the whole movie.
Well, even I'm just looking at my notes here, and at some point, it looks like about a third into the movie, I wrote a very horny movie,
Yes.
but like 12-year-old horny.
Yes.
Like a bunch of horny 12-year-old boys wrote this movie, is what it feels like.
Who somehow thought they'd get laid if they were a duck.
Oh man, if I was a duck.
Pulling all the chicks.
So the movie starts out, we basically start off in Duck World, which I don't think is named right away, but it was sort of shocking to me. We were introduced to Howard coming home from a hard day at work, and we're sort of like panning around the room, Back to the Future style, where we're getting, which interestingly enough, because of the Leah Thompson connection, if you go to IMDb, there's a picture of Back to the Future on Howard the Duck's page, like because they came out so close together, and I think there's some weird similarities here. But anyway,
Yes.
we get this sort of panning shot, and we get all these duck jokes, which there are many and many.
So good.
So many dumb duck jokes in this movie, but it's one of its features. It is not a bug, I would argue. We get like May Nest and W.C. Fowles,
Yeah.
and My Little Chickadee, and like Breeders of the Lost Stork.
Yes.
Indiana Jones.
Indiana
riff.
Jones, yeah.
Now, I really enjoyed the picture of like Howard as like a hippie.
Yes.
So like, are we to assume that like he had been kind of like a long gone daddy-o duck at one point? And...
Well, and that kind of like, I guess, a multiverse sort of implication that Duck Planet followed the exact
Yes.
same beats of Earth history, but just with ducks.
Like the end
Yeah.
of the Tim Burton Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Yes. Like
They-
there
they
was
had
a George
hippies.
Washington duck or
Yes.
whatever
Yeah.
who looked exactly like George Washington
And a George Luke Duck
right.
and Steven Spiel Duck, who made the Indiana Jones movie.
It's so dumb, but I am just laughing at just
Well,
recalling
now that we're
it.
saying this out loud, I'm actually feel like an idiot that it didn't dawn on me before. It's like one of my all-time favorite shows growing up, and actually some of the few comic books I did read at that age was DuckTales and the old Carl Barks, like Donald Duck,
Yeah.
Scrooge McDuck comics.
Yeah.
And clearly that was part of why I must have liked this, is I just liked the whole idea of a duck civilization.
Did they do that with those comics? I didn't read those. So was it like a whole duck civilization? Okay, yeah.
Well, it's actually kind of weird because in Duckburg, it was more the naming convention where everything was that, but it was a civilization of birds,
Right.
but then there was also like dog people.
Okay, yeah, of course, because
His butler, who's named Duckworth, not Dogworth, but he was like a dog. It's a little confusing species-wise.
that's very confusing. It's a fun introduction to the character, but I mean, right away we get into the weird sex stuff.
There's not one, but two. Like within the first like 4 minutes of this movie, we get like two different naked topless duck women.
Like he's reading Play Duck, and he's like scratching his balls at one point.
Yeah.
Well, and we also get like don't forget, like he's checking his answering machine, and we get like the sexy call from
Right. Oh,
like,
yeah.
why don't you come over and I'll show you and all this, and it's just like,
Yeah, like I had a dream about you or something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So I mean, it's like right off the bat, it's sort of like throwing down this mission statement of like, we're gonna make you feel weird with duck sex.
I do think that is well. I can't imagine Marvel Comics had any like nudity in them.
No.
Just with the comic, but I do think that was trying to be true to the kind of the sort of
irreverent spirit or
Yeah, and
whatever.
as you're saying, they kind of watered down our Crumb that the comics were going for.
I mean, I don't recall if I ever read a comic where it had any sort of this like innuendo-y stuff in it. This does not feel like it's coming from the comics. And like honestly, the character of Howard as he's presented in this movie is not really accurate to the comics in any way. He doesn't really look like him. I mean, he's kind of got his attitude, but he's not wearing the same clothes. They dress him all up in these sort of 80s fashions throughout this whole movie. The design of him, he's got this sort of like pompadour. He's not wearing a hat. So I mean, the design of him is totally different. He's really just kind of Howard the Duck in name only. I mean, he kind of has the same sort of attitude, I guess.
A little bit of the attitude, but I do think the voice casting, like, you know, I feel like when you look at like Seth Green, I think actually was a good choice for his cameo at the end of Guardians of the Galaxy. Because I feel like, so looking at some of the comics, and again, it's been a long time since I've looked at him, but I kind of got and this was before Guardians came out, so I wasn't thinking Seth Green, but I almost pictured him sounding kind of like a Danny DeVito or
Totally.
something,
Yeah.
where he was meant to kind of, because he was always like cigar chomping.
Yes. He's like Louis De Palma in Taxi. You know,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like that character. That's how he sort of is in the comics. And here he's more like a cool, slick guy. He's like more of a yuppie almost.
Well, and that's maybe before we even get into the movie, like just talking about the cast of this was something that really I was thinking a lot and jumped out to me watching now. But the Howard guy specifically, I looked this up because I'm like, who is this guy? Like, he doesn't sound like anybody, and he was like some famous Broadway dude.
The guy doing his voice.
Yeah, like right after he did this, he went on to originate a lead role in Sondheimer, who did Into the Woods. They
Oh,
just
really?
made the movie, but he played the James Corden character from the movie, who's kind of the central figure.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's because I feel like this would have for sure be it would be like Will Ferrell or Kevin Hart or something
Yeah.
like that.
Mhm.
They would want that name they could tack on. Or actually, you know what? I take that back because we didn't do that with Sonic, and the studio really wanted us to. I say us as though I had any say in it, but like our director fought really hard for Ben Schwartz because Ben Schwartz, they got to be in like a proof of concept we did, and we just thought it was so perfect. And you know, as a studio will, I don't want to like throw them under the bus like they hated Ben Schwartz, but it's definitely like when you kind of get to that stage, it's like, well, that was just a proof of concept. What big celebrity are we going to get
Right.
to do the voice? And you know, to their credit, eventually they was like, well, no one's going to be better than him, and it served when well that he had the proof of concept so they could hear him. And also he's on the new DuckTales.
Right.
He's on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Obviously people loved him from Parks and Rec.
Yeah.
He has a proven track record of being lovable and hilarious.
I think that's something that really works in Sonic's favor because I get pulled out of it when you've got Will Ferrell or whatever. I want to buy into, you know, this character. So, like, I don't want the big celebrity name. I know it's, I guess, more marketable or whatever, but to me, a guy like it's Ben Schwartz, right?
Yeah.
That's like the perfect level. Like, give me somebody who's been in sitcoms or whatever who I like and know, so I can recognize him and go, oh, cool, it's that guy, but not so much that I think about it the whole time.
Agreed.
But they should have gotten Danny DeVito.
Yes, Danny DeVito would have been a step up from this guy, and I feel bad that we can't remember his name. He has a really kind of hard to remember name, but he does a fine job.
Yeah, he's good. I'm not trying to. Wait, I wrote it down. Chip Zien or Zien. No, I think they chose him because they're like, he's got kind of a fun, cartoony
Yeah.
sort of voice. He doesn't just sound like a guy.
So anyway, like we get this introduction to Duck World, but it's very brief. It was sort of shocking to me how brief this is. This is like literally 3 minutes or something, not even, of setup. And then a boom tube opens up and sucks Howard through his apartment building. So we get hilarious shots of him going through all the neighbors or whatever. You got the old couple like, what was that, dear? Whatever. But
Yeah.
most shockingly, he goes through the bathroom of a duck woman in the bathtub, and we get full duck upper nudity.
Duck boobs.
It's shocking.
It's very. I feel like as a kid, I was just like, ha 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 ha.
Uh-huh.
Now watching it now for whatever. Now I'm actually kind of like ew.
Yeah.
Like, it's just sort of, there's something a little disquieting about having to look at it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a kid, well, I think at the time, like, especially in the 80s, like, that was just so common. That's why we were like, you would just like that. You'd laugh and be like, boobs. Like that's
Yeah.
how that was the
Yeah.
reaction then. But yeah, now it's like, whoa, like what is
Yeah.
this?
What is this?
What is
And
this?
again, I was trying to imagine, like, what if Sonic the Hedgehog had begun with him on his hedgehog planet and we just see some topless hedgehog girl?
Yeah.
What is this rated?
It probably was PG-13. It was definitely after the PG-13
No, it's PG.
rating.
I'm looking at it right now.
Wow. Okay.
It's PG.
Okay.
Wow.
Blowing my
But
mind.
that was the time. I mean, that was PG boobs.
Yeah, I'm sure the MPAA also was just like, well, they're not real boobs.
They're duck boobs.
ducks.
Except ducks don't have boobs, which is the
No,
thing
yeah.
that really boils your mind as an adult. Like as a kid, you just kind of roll with the anthropomorphic thing, but it's like it's a little it's something about like your logical adult brain. I think chafes with this way worse than your child brain did. Yeah, so I mean, Howard is immediately sucked into space by this sort of boom tubey thing, and there's no explanation given at this point in the movie. I mean, this is like we're in 3 minutes, and then we're out of Duck World, and it's kind of like it speaks to what you were saying about the pacing of this movie being all over the place, because it's like you could have spent like 10 minutes in Duck World, like.
Yeah. We definitely don't learn anything about Howard other than he's a ladies' man. Yeah, we never really learn anything. I mean,
We get a little more later when he and like Leah Thompson or Beverly are having kind of a heart to heart later. But that's really it.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah.
But anyway, so like Howard gets sucked into this boob
tube
through space,
tube.
and then he ends up landing in Cleveland, which is pretty funny. I mean, I think doesn't the word Cleveland have something to do with ducks in some way? I think it does. I think that's why
That
they
I don't
chose
know.
Cleveland.
but I feel this was during an era where Cleveland was really funny too.
Right.
Like Major League took place there and the Drew Carey show in the 90s.
Was it because like, oh, Cleveland's so lame or something? Is that
Yeah,
why?
or I think it was because this was coming off the era, like Randy Newman has a whole song from one of his albums about the river in Cleveland that just burst into flames because it was so polluted. So I think it was kind of the idea, like, so, Detroit would kind of get used for
Yeah.
the same way that it's just like a dump, but less exciting than Detroit, because Detroit's
Right.
at least seems like dangerous and kind of cool because Motown was there and all the auto plants. Cleveland's just kind of like, hey, it's Cleveland.
Yeah.
Is that why is it the Drew Carey show that had like the song? It was like Cleveland Rocks.
Cleveland
Yeah,
Rocks,
is that
yeah.
okay? Cleveland Rocks.
Because I think Drew Carey's from Cleveland, so that was kind of like taking it back, Cleveland pride.
Well, in the world of Howard the Duck, Cleveland seems pretty crime-ridden, and the perpetrators of most of the crime seem to be punk rockers. Hilariously
Well, it was the
cartoonish
80s.
80s
Yeah.
punk rockers. They're especially cartoonish here. Like, if you compare these cartoonishly evil punk rockers to, say, Death Wish 3 or something,
Yeah.
they're like super sanitized. Like their punk rock outfits are like perfect. The rips are all in the perfect places.
Yeah. Again, as a kid, you don't think about it because that's just, you're like, oh, they're hooligans.
Yeah.
But then as I got older and really thought about it, I'm like, well, they're dressed like punks who are going to a concert.
Yeah.
I don't, even if those people did go out and mug people, I don't know that anyone would ever be like, I'm going to spend 55 minutes putting my hair into a mohawk and putting on like makeup and my favorite like leather jacket to go skulk around and rob people.
Yes. No, I guarantee it never happened, not even once.
I think usually when you're a mugger too, you want to make it hard to identify you later.
Yeah.
Yes.
you don't want
So
someone to
maybe
be like,
don't do the pink mohawk.
yeah, they had a bright pink mohawk. That enough said.
Yeah.
So like Howard gets basically pushed around the street a little bit. I was sort of kept expecting there to be more sort of duck out of water comedy, but like it kind of doesn't
Duck
go
out
there
of water.
that many times. You wouldn't think it does go there, but not as many times as you would think. So he kind of gets like just pushed around the street, and they end up like taking him into a punk club as a part of like their mugging process. they're like, oh, let's grab this duck guy.
As one does.
Yeah. And you just bring him into the club with you.
Well, and they give him to like one of their crew who doesn't look punk at all, and they're like, "Look, we finally got you a date." And he like, they
right.
like shove him onto him, and he's like, and then like the bouncer's like, "I know that's a kid. Get out of here."
I'd be kind of lying if I didn't say this comedy worked for me a little bit. And I mean, there's, and this is, less sensitive of a point, but one thing I noticed watching the movie this time is a lot of the physical comedy is based around put a little person in a suit and sort of toss them around. I don't think this would happen. This wouldn't happen now for many reasons.
For many reasons.
Howard was played by a whole bunch of different people throughout the movie, so it wasn't just one poor person being abused in that duck suit. But the duck suit is kind of amazing.
Yes.
I mean, the expressions he makes are really good, and
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah,
Like, and it's one of the reasons I would actually, I think it's hard to really call this movie bad in the truest sense, because that is kind of what I was saying, watching it now again after my previous time where I was more focusing on how not amazing my friends thought it was. But like, the special effects are just so good.
Yeah.
And coupled with what a just kind of inherently bad decision this was to make as a really expensive movie. It's like those things combined, I'm just kind of like, this, it's kind of insane and amazing that this movie exists. Because, yeah, this suit is fantastic.
Yeah.
Certain points where I really don't know how they did it, because like I was actually just editing together for Friday Night Fright Show some behind the scenes footage of the Chucky puppet from Child's Play. And granted, in a lot of those shots, there isn't anybody inside it. So it's a full puppet, but it's like, this was an era where animatronics, all the behind the scenes is when the camera pulls back and there's just like 8 dudes and a million cables. But like, they clearly had this thing up with remote controls where the face could move, where he's just walking around in full shots, and it still looks really good. I mean, granted, this is George Lucas flexing his like ILM muscles of this movie's the number one priority, guys. But like, even the whole opening, all that planet, and just like the stuff out in space, and then not to jump ahead, but like some of the Phil Tippett stop motion stuff at the end, I'm like, this is very impressive special effects.
For sure. And I think you're absolutely right that there had to have been some sort of remote control, because I specifically was watching for that, like scenes where he would start to talk and then turn around, and I was like, okay, there's no way they had him wired in, because you would have seen it, and this was, before the days you could CGI out things. So it's pretty amazing. I think it's a really impressive special effect.
And it holds up well to close-ups too,
Yeah.
which certain things often don't. Even like Chucky, which works well because he's supposed to be made of plastic, but as he's sort of slowly turning more human in the first movie, the shots where like you get really close up and you're like, that doesn't hold up great to an extreme close up, especially when you're watching it on like a Blu-ray now. I mean, I don't know if he was made out of real feathers, the Howard mask, like the feather part, but just like, it just looks good. And the way the lips move are pretty subtle, actually. I mean, it's simple because it's a beak. It's not like he has to articulate super realistic lip movements.
They get some sort of expressions out of it, though. It's not always like a static beak.
Yeah, it's not just like snapping open and closed like Planet of the Apes or whatever.
Right. No, it's impressive.
And he's super cute. He's just cute. I mean, I just love the way he looks. Like I do. I love his little tail feathers out of like the back of his like pants. He's just, I don't know. He's adorable. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think they did a wonderful job. I think it's like you get a lot of expressions, and I think he looks great.
You know who else thinks he's adorable is our heroine, Leah Thompson,
Oh my God.
who sings for the band Cherry Bomb, which is a really unoriginal name considering it was the biggest hit of the Runaways. Why not just call the band the Runaways if you're going to be that lazy about it?
I looked it up, and that is her singing.
Oh, is it? Cool.
Yeah.
She's got a good voice.
Not like it was so amazing that I was like, oh my God, but I don't know. It was good enough that I always take it for granted in any movie, especially movies like this era, that it's just going to be horrible lip sync.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's why I looked it up, because I'm like, oh, her lip syncing is really good.
Yeah, it also said that she got the the guitar as well. Like she got to keep it, and she still like
Oh, nice.
plays it every now
wow.
and again. Yeah,
You know what? That makes me happy.
yeah.
That I like to imagine that you're over at Leah Thompson's house and she's got that hanging up. And like, oh, and she's like, this is the guitar from Howard the Duck.
It make me fall in love with her even more. She's amazing in this. Her hair is like huge and awesome.
Oh, it's
and
very crimped. So crimped.
she totally passes as like a new wave rocker chick, like a cartoonish one, like, you know, Gem and the Holograms
Yes.
type of
Yeah.
version.
Before moving on with the inevitable weirdness of their relationship, the other thing I was really thinking about again now watching it and the cast, because like, you know, Tim Robbins, that's like a fun example of like that Tim Robbins was nobody, you know, he was
Yeah.
just some new wacky guy that they're like, oh, he's like 1,000 feet tall and looks like a Muppet. He'll be hilarious. But I was thinking about the fact like Leah Thompson made this movie after Back to the Future came out. Again, it's the power of George Lucas that she's like, I'm going to use my Back to the Future juice
Right.
to do Howard the Duck. And then I was also thinking about the fact that Jeffrey Jones did this after he was getting nominated for like, I don't think he got nominated for an Oscar. He got nominated for a Golden Globe, but for Amadeus, which like, I mean, I know a lot, like as a kid, I thought of him always as the guy from Howard the Duck and Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
And Beetlejuice.
And Beetlejuice.
Yeah.
But like, no, but like as an adult and like learning his real history was like he was a Tony nominated like stage guy who was then put in Amadeus and got great reviews. So he was using his I'm a Golden Globe nominated dramatic actor juice to do Howard the Duck. It's just so crazy. Clearly, what everyone thought this movie was gonna be, and think I've realized over the years thinking about it too what it really is. Because it's always like, how do movies like this get made? It's because everyone thought Star Wars was going to fail.
Right.
You know, there's so many famous stories of all this, you know, like that the Fox, like, laughingly gave him the rights to merchandising when he waived his director's fee. Like, joke's on you, dummy. We're going to save $50,000 here. You can have all the, you know. So I think it was after that movie blew up so big, they had to make everyone so self-conscious when George Lucas pitched you something.
Yeah.
Because I bet they looked at Howard the Duck and they were probably like,
This doesn't seem like a good idea.
who's going to see? Like, this looks stupid. But they're like, but it's George. This could be the new Star Wars. Here's all the money
Can
you
you imagine
want.
if we were living in a reality where this was even bigger than Star Wars and like Howard the Duck was like
Oh
a
my God.
franchise?
I'm just thinking of J.J. Abrams rebooting it now and everyone bitching about which was better, this or George Lucas's horrible Howard the Duck prequels.
Well, I found out just I was looking also regarding his involvement, George Lucas's involvement, wanting to adapt this. Went back to American Graffiti Times, which makes sense because he had the writers on that too. But they were talking about it back in like 73.
So they were all smoking weed on the set of American Graffiti and be like, hey, have you ever read Howard the Duck? That would be a good movie. Yeah.
I mean, the comic must have just seemed real cool then or something.
Well, I mean, I think it's for them. Like if you were saying, you know, is what Sebastian was saying, like, you know, as far as like who this was for or who would be into it or who would think Howard the Duck was cool, it's that age. It's the like boomers, you know?
This is true. So Leah Thompson plays Beverly, and she thinks Howard is pretty cool because she gets attacked by punkers outside the club, as you do, and then Howard comes to her rescue, and he saves her with his quack foo.
I do not get tired. I love puns so much, and poor Sebastian just has to deal with it all the time.
Well, that's why I can't believe I didn't make the DuckTales connection, because I'm like, it's literally the same thing. It's just adding the word duck to anything.
Well, they branch out a little bit into all sorts of birds, but it pretty much sticks with ducks. They really nail that one home over and over and over.
And I'm delighted every time.
So this is sort of the beginning of their meet cute. And like right away, even out while they're out in this like rainy street set or whatever, you know, they're kind of giving each other looks. And like Howard saves Beverly and he's like, well, I guess I'm just going to stay out here in the rain. And she sort of got her umbrella and she keeps glancing over at him and he keeps glancing back at her. They're definitely setting up this as a romance. Like that is 100% the intention of the writers or whatever. But at the same time, the movie is also desperately terrified to not go there. So you're sort of trapped in this weird struggle of will they or won't they in a situation where you're like, please don't let them. It's like the opposite of Sam and Diane in Cheers. It's like, or Ross and Rachel in Friends. It's like, please no. But in some ways I wanted it.
Once you see that they're hinting at it, you do want it in the sense that you're like, are they really gonna have her hook up with Howard? I mean, everyone's reaction to him in the movie is so strange because people are like, oh, that's weird, a duck, rather than like being horrified. Like they're acknowledging that it's unusual, but people are so get over it so quickly.
I feel like though, and I mean this, applies to Sonic too, is like, I feel like when you're dealing with a movie like this, at some point, like, I mean, if you saw Sonic the Hedgehog in real life, you'd be like, oh my God, my brain is shattered. This thing should not exist.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like, it's that leap of faith you have to take with all these types of movies, because like really, if you saw a duck human, you'd be freaked out. You wouldn't know what to think.
In our defense, in Sonic, James Marsden screams and shoots Sonic.
That's true, yes.
With the gun he was holding.
And there like the people who meet Howard throughout the film, like through Beverly or whatever, they have the reaction you're talking about. But there's also like, there's scenes later where he's like, I think when he, we'll get to it, but when he's going to the museum or whatever, he like passes some lady on the stairs and she's like, "Ah!" Like she doesn't know what to do. Like there is some like legit freak outs.
That's true. I just feel for the most part they're reacting to him as though they saw somebody wearing like a silly duck costume.
Yes.
We were just kind of looking at him like, what is up with this guy?
It's definitely not consistent. Everybody kind of has a different approach to him. Some people are like, oh, he's a duck guy. Some people are like, oh my God. And yeah, some people think he's wearing a costume.
And in this movie's defense, even though James Marsden and Jim Carrey both scream when we see him, we also have later where he's just like wearing a cowboy hat, and somehow that's enough for people to just be like, you look weird.
That's the fun of these things. You don't want to turn this into an H.P. Lovecraft, oh, my brain is shattered by this vision, nightmare's vision. At some point, you want to start having a good time. Yeah. And I'm having a good time with Howard.
Oh, yeah.
Beverly takes Howard back to her cool loft space, and, they bond, and she goes to get him a drink, and he's like, I want a beer. And so he's a beer-swilling duck. And then this is where we have a little bit more of Howard backstory, because we find out he was a musician because, he starts playing her synthesizer or whatever. Now he's got to be a boring advertising executive, which is such a sort of 80s like career trap to fall into. It was like, oh man, if I don't do something, I'm going to end up in advertising.
Fear of becoming a yuppie.
Yeah. And Beverly's like, oh, so you kind of sold out.
Yes. He's a sellout.
Yeah.
Which, they set this up as, this is sort of his thing to overcome as a character, but that's not really what he overcomes. He doesn't overcome being a sellout. I mean, he ends up becoming her manager, which I guess is a better career option, sort of.
Than him having his own career.
Right, being a manager isn't really living the dream.
That's nice, because I feel like usually in movies that's inverted gender-wise, where it's like the female romantic interest settles for just supporting the male protagonist's career.
Totally.
So this movie's really ahead of its time.
Really forward thinking.
It is very progressive in many strange, unsettling ways. But yeah, so we get a little bit more. We start to get more here about, their sort of relationship. I know we're just going to keep coming back to this because there's just no way not to. But he falls asleep, and she has this sort of tender scene where she's touching his feathered coif. And then she goes through his... Jen, do you want to take this?
Sure. So she goes through his wallet because it had fallen on the floor. And, we get to see his license, and he's from like Washington Duck,
Mm-hmm.
DC or something like that. They're all,
Naturally.
and he's got like a picture of him with some babes at the beach, some duck babes.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got a picture of him with his mom and dad, which is sweet. And then we're looking at his credit cards. He's like Master Quack and like Blooming Ducks. And I'm so here for all of this. Every single like goofy duck thing. I'm so excited. And then we go and we see he has money that looks like US money, but it's from the United States of something. I can't remember. It was something AD something or another. It wasn't really a straight up duck name, but it looks like American money. And then we see a tiny duck condom. And I think I kind of remember this from seeing, because I literally had not seen this since I was a kid until today. And I just was like, especially with all of the like cute packaging, like they couldn't have had like a cute condom package. Like this condom is not wrapped.
Nope. It's an unwrapped duck condom. Well, and
Condom.
I guess the thinking there is if you don't see it, you're not going to know what it is. But I mean, like, is that really the hill you want to die on? Like, just put it in a pack, because it's even grosser that it's not
Grosser.
wrapped.
And Beverly goes, "Oh, Howard."
Ugh. That makes it worse. I don't know why. Her acting like it's cute makes it worse.
But yeah, it could have just been in a cute little package with like some sort of troduck or something, or I don't
Right,
know.
yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, that was something.
Any other decision would have been better. I mean, cutting it out would have been the best decision. And you have to wonder, like, while they're editing this, they're seeing this over and over, and like nobody's like, the unwrapped duck condom. Do we really need the unwrapped duck condom? You see George Lucas sitting back there. Yes, we need the unwrapped duck
Yeah.
condom.
Again, it's just, I know, because the movie's too like doofy and little kiddie for anyone who wanted this kind of like subversive, raunchy comedy.
Are they thinking that it's going to keep the parents entertained? Is that what maybe the thinking is?
There's something for everyone.
I know they weren't thinking this, but all it really did is that it was great. I feel for like being a kid. I could tell the difference between like this and a Care Bears movie.
Right.
I don't know how much I necessarily intellectualized it, but just, that this wasn't like a kid's movie. I felt like I was just watching a normal movie aimed at everybody else.
That starred a cartoon duck.
Yeah. Like all my favorite things.
So, yeah, the duck condom sort of stuns you and leaves you feeling dazed. And the next few scenes is basically what we're setting up is that Beverly's taking Howard to her scientist friend, Phil, played by Tim Robbins. And he works at the Natural History Museum or something. And she, like, takes Howard there in a trash bag, which I found a little bit, like...
It is like creepily dragging him up the stairs and stuff. I'm like, just pick him up. How much can he possibly weigh?
Right.
But yeah, so we're introduced to Phil here as Tim Robbins. Now, I have a special connection to Tim Robbins because for some weird fucking reason, people think I look like Tim Robbins and say it all the friggin' time.
It's true.
And I do not look like Tim Robbins.
You don't look, I wouldn't say you don't, you could look less like him, but I would say you don't look anything like him.
But he gets it all the time. Like
It's really
no.
weird.
It's like people have said it to me. Like do you know your
Oh, you
husband
married
looks
the Tim
like
Robbins guy.
Yeah, it's so.
I feel
weird.
like I look more like Tim Robbins than you do, and I don't
probably
think I
do.
look like Tim Robbins either.
Well, first of all, he's like 9 feet tall, and I am not.
He's-
And like one guy asked me for my autograph as Tim Robbins, and I was like, "Do I?"
What?
Yes. And I'm like, "Dude, don't look anything like him." He's like, "Come on, man, you can't fool me." Like he thought I was like being a jerk and not wanting to give him an autograph, and I was like, "No, I'm not him. Like, let's look at a picture
You
of
also
him."
don't sound
No.
anything like him either. I mean, granted, I guess probably normal people don't realize that he's like a super giant freak.
I think people just don't look closely at his face or something. Like even his nose is different
Yes.
than mine. I don't get it at all. But anyway, I like him a lot. He's an actor that I really enjoy seeing. But this was the first time I ever remember seeing him as this
Oh, and
character.
he's really turning it up to 11.
Oh my God,
at
is
all
he ever?
points in this whole movie.
Yeah, he's going like full comedy performance. And I kind of enjoy it. I mean, I think at the time when I first saw it, I thought he was annoying because he was sort of that annoying comic
Oh,
character.
I would have if I was a teenager. I loved him because I was a baby.
Yeah.
I thought he was hilarious. He was one of my favorite parts of the movie.
Right.
as
He's
a kid.
almost the Jar Jar of the movie, but I wouldn't go that far.
Yes, but if there is that slot to be filled, it is certainly by him.
Yes, he's doing a very broad comedic performance, but a pretty good one, I think, and especially considering looking at his later career and how, I mean, he does comedy stuff he's done it kind of consistently, but he's become much more of a serious actor as time has gone on. So it's kind of refreshing to get this broad Tim Robbins performance. The best part, I think, the part where I was most having the best time with him was when he's trying to get Howard to express his superpowers or whatever.
Yeah. He just can't accept that Howard has absolutely no powers, no alien powers.
Yes.
He's just a duck.
Just a regular duck man.
And like Howard's pretty much a jerk to him right away. Like he doesn't really like him at all. I don't know if we're supposed to feel that Howard's jealous of him or something.
I think it's like a love triangle is how Howard's responding to it.
Right.
Of just like, who's this friend of yours?
Yeah, he's kind of a dick, like right off the bat. He thinks he's full of shit. He's like gets pissed that he's bugging him about superpowers and stuff. And then we find out after this hilarious scene where Tim Robbins is laying out his theory of duck evolution. We're like looking at a display in the museum, but then it changes to like duck Cro-Magnon man and stuff. It's ridiculous. But after that, we find out is it that Tim Robbins is really a janitor?
Well, at first he's not a janitor, and it was when he's going over the duck evolution or whatever. Also, something funny is Howard's like, everyone learns this in duck school. Like this isn't any big revelation, like he makes some
duck school. I know that they would call it duck school on a planet. full
right
of
of ducks, yeah. But he says like duck school or something like that, and then. Yeah, he's not the janitor, but that's what Howard says. But he's like a lab assistant.
He gets treated like the janitor.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's not supposed to be doing all the stuff
Right.
he is doing.
Yeah, he's acting like he's a scientist, but he's still in school.
He's just getting treated badly by the snooty scientists that work
Yes.
there
Yes.
at the Natural History Museum.
Yes, as they do.
So yeah, Howard's not digging Phil, so he basically is like he's had enough of this science crap. And so he leaves, and him and Beverly have like a falling out here, this sort of weird beat where they, go their separate ways, and they have their first fight, and it's kind of really over nothing. Like Howard's like, I don't want to do this anymore, and Beverly's like, fine, go do something else then.
You're impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they've like hung out for like 5 minutes. It's like
What? Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Every time.
This is way too soon in the romantic comedy to be having the breakup scene, like way too early. But I'm glad it happens because this is kind of my favorite segment in the whole movie. These two scenes. So Howard goes to the unemployment office dressed in child's clothes that he's gotten from like, I don't know, St. Vinny's or something. Like he's wearing he's got like a leather cap on and like sunglasses, and he's gotten like the most surly woman who works at the unemployment office who thinks he's a lazy slacker. Like she's really chewing him out for not having gainful employment. It's really kind of a wonderful scene. And he tries to bite her ass at one point. Like she turns her big butt his way, and
he's like, "Woo!"
No, he almost goes in to bite it.
Yeah.
Because he's so pissed that she's treating him so poorly.
No, he's horny about her butt. No, when
Are
she
you
turns
sure?
around, yes, because she turns around and he's all like irritated about it. But then she turns around and he's like, "Ooh," and then he's like going in to nibble on her butt.
Oh
But like
God, you're probably right.
he's horny for her butt. Yeah, 100%.
It's around the same time as Little Shop of Horrors, and that has the bit where they're in the lobby to go see John Candy's character, and the plant is like trying to bite some
Butts.
woman's butt.
Yeah.
It was just in the air, I guess.
It
at
was
that
a
time.
trend. Yeah,
It was the
It was
time.
an 80s trend. This is also the part of the movie where like, and eventually things will pick back up soon once we get to Jeffrey Jones. But this is the portion of the movie where I kind of have the feeling where I'm like, where is this going? Like we're kind of losing some forward momentum by them having like a fight, and they're not really being any objective other than it's just like, what am I going to do with my life now?
Yeah, but you know what? I would watch like a fucking factotum version of Howard the Duck where it's just him going from job to job,
Job to
like
job.
a Charles Duckowski book or whatever, where Howard's just like, now he's working at Hot Tub Fever, which is the place where he
The
goes
best.
to work is like
So
And
gross.
like, I don't know if these really existed in the 80s. They probably did. And
They're in so many movies, though.
these hot tub sex clubs.
Ugh.
What? I think there's a whole movie
So
that's called
gross.
like Hollywood
Hot Tub.
Right. Yes.
It's about some sort of hot tub spa. I don't know what you would even try to call it.
Yeah, like
but-
a spa where there's a bunch of hot tubs and mud baths, but everybody's just there to fuck.
Getting down. It's so gross.
the strip club version of a spa is what it
Yes.
feels like.
I'm sure it was a real thing in Hollywood at the very least at some point. Poor Howard has got a job there as the towel boy at Hot Tub Fever. And like his boss is demanding that he cleans out one of the sex tubs.
Sex tub.
And like because the filter has gotten dirty or something, and like Howard doesn't want to do it, so he like throws him into the sex tub. And like, look, I see the logic. You've got a duck that can swim.
yeah.
But he can't swim.
That's right. We find out
Yeah.
Howard can't swim. But yeah, so to get revenge on getting thrown in the gross sex tub, Howard pushes the boss into the lava of love, which is like this gross mud pit where people are having sex in. Really gross, but kind of my favorite part of the movie, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Hot tub fever.
And then comes another scene which I love where Howard is like down, and he's lost his job, and so he's just kind of wandering the street, and he wanders by a department store with TVs in the window, a great narrative delivery device of any film, especially around this time. And he sees all these shows about like duck hunting and like ads for Duckaroni.
Like cooking a duck on like as a cooking show or something with like like a duck being cooked. And yeah, it's just all of these horrible, like everything's terrible for ducks. And he's so horrified.
Yeah, this trio of scenes is kind of my favorite part of the whole movie. It's just because it's so insane.
It's pretty great.
But this sort of takes Howard back to the rock club, and he hears Beverly singing a sad ballad that seems sort of to be about him. And one thing I love about this rock club is it's got a chain link fence in front of the stage so that, when people want to throw bottles at you or whatever, it just smashes against the fence. As somebody who's played in many rock bands, I can assure you that really was never a thing. That you see that in movies all the time.
Blues Brothers.
Right.
And
No, they would just let people
Roadhouse.
throw things at you. There was no,
Yeah.
there was no chain link fence. Yeah, it's kind of a weird scene because Howard kind of wanders into the sound of her voice, siren songing him into the club. And then she's kind of like, screw that song. And she starts into like a rocking number. And while this is going on, Howard overhears her sleazy manager, Ginger, like talking to a bunch of other like goons, one of whom is Richard Edson, weirdly.
I know. Who was in everything in the 80s, early 90s.
Right. He sort of went on to be, or even this was during the 80s, but he was in a lot of the Jim Jarmusch stuff, Down by Lawns. I mean, he's a really great character actor. And I mean, obviously he can do a part like this in his sleep. This is just the kind of thing like he does on a Saturday or whatever. Just kind of like, hey, whatever, whoa. But yeah, he's one of the sleaze balls at the bar. So like Howard basically wants to take over managing the band. And so they get into this sort of bar fight where they've put Howard up on the bar and he's getting pushed down the bar and whatever. Yeah, then at one point he gets like a knife or something and he stabs it through the guy's earring and pins him to the bar and gets him to hand over the control of the band. And then he threatens the other guys with space rabies. Why would a duck have space rabies? I don't know.
Yeah, well, the normal people, like Tim Robbins treats him like an alien.
Yeah.
Everyone else, it's more kind of like a Muppet, where they're like, that's a duck, man.
Well, right. And like these guys don't assume he's from outer space. So why would they?
Yeah, exactly.
Why would they be like, oh, why would that make sense to them?
You'd be confusing.
Yeah, you'd be like, what?
Yeah, you should have been like, I have duck rabies.
Right. It's a weird joke that doesn't really quite work.
Again, it's very little kid, despite the inappropriate stuff. Like it all works on just like a big, goofy. Like I recently rewatched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Very different movie, and that one has a more consistent, appropriate tone for its age group. But like that's all just full of like big, silly jokes and kind of like hammy overacting.
Right.
I feel like it falls in that vein, but the fact that like it's like a love story between a duck and a rocker girl and has duck boobs. I'm almost surprised. The only thing that would be even more fitting for how all over the place this would be is if it periodically just like 3 times in the movie somebody said fuck.
Right.
It's like that's the only thing that doesn't make this seem like a movie aimed at adults is that no one swears.
Right.
Other than that, though, it's very hard to tell what their intention was.
One interesting thing that Jen pointed out is one of the band members is Holly Robinson.
Yeah, which that I had not remembered.
I
guess
didn't
because
remember either.
I didn't really know who she was when I was watching this as a kid.
She's in there for all you 21 Jump Street, OG 21 Jump Street fans.
And Head of the Class, I think, too.
Right.
She was on Head of the Class. But yeah, 21 Jump Street for sure.
So we get this scene backstage where like Tim Robbins shows up and like pulls a feather off of Howard, which does not endear him any further to Howard. And then Beverly and Ducky go back to her place. And if this movie has gotten weird before, now we're really getting really weird. Because like Howard like jams on her synths or whatever, but then like Leah Thompson comes out of the bathroom in like this really skimpy like panties and t-shirt outfit, and oh my goodness, it gets weird.
Yep.
It can't be said enough of who was this aimed for. Because granted, like, by the time I was like, obviously like 11 and 12, that was when I reached the age where I wanted to rent as many movies as possible that would have had Leah Thompson in a skimpy little outfit. But I feel like when I was like a real little kid, when I most loved the movie, I almost feel like that was meaningless.
Right.
To me.
Or you'd be like, gross, a girl in her underwear.
It's like, bring Tim Robbins back. Who cares about this character?
Yeah, but they do this whole weird, like, he's into her, but then so she's like, well, okay, you're into me. Well, then, like first she just tries to get him to watch Letterman with her, which is amazing. But then, so he's in bed with her, and then, he's kind of giving her the business, but then she turns it around on him. But then he's like, oh, no, we can't do this. And so it's like going back and forth between them, which is just another bizarre decision. I mean, I guess I don't know how else you play it if you're going to go there, but
I mean, it's stuff that we've seen before, like
definitely, yeah.
where, like a man, and again, it's definitely during this time or maybe even earlier where like the man is like coming on strong and then when the woman kicks it back, then all of a
Right.
sudden he's like, oh, and so then
Doesn't
he
know what to do. Yeah.
doesn't know what to do. But it's like, it's the line that he says is, he's like, I have a headache. And she's like, and I'm the aspirin. And it's like, oh, what?
You didn't find that sexy?
No.
Well, I was gonna say it almost makes it weirder
Yeah.
and creepier.
Yeah.
Like in some ways, it's almost like if the scene had just been they go back, and then she's like, "How about we get freaky?" And he's like, "Let's do it." And they fall on the bed, and the lights turn up. You'd kind of been like, "Whoa,
Yeah.
they bang!" But the fact that they're trying to play it straight, like like this was some early '80s Patrick Dempsey movie
Yeah.
where he's like this cute nerd and like really trying to get you to buy into the, as you noted, will they or won't they. It's like Patton Oswalt has a great routine about how he thinks people who use silly nonsense words in replacing of instead of referring to like your dick or whatever, like, oh my, noo na na or whatever, you're like, ew.
Right.
Like,
It's worse.
like that makes it worse. That's what this gives me the vibe. The fact that
Yeah.
they're trying to play it like cutesy and chaste. I'm just like, what do you want me to be feeling
Yeah.
emotionally from this scene?
Well-
Like I'm not into this.
It's
No.
whiplashing you between two feelings you don't want to feel, which are he's into her and then she's into him. And you're just like, I don't want to feel either of those things.
Well, then there's also too, like, I was thinking about this time when I was watching it, is it's like, there's the whole like he's a duck man from outer space thing going on, but if we also like take into account that like there's a photo of him in his duck apartment where he's like a hippie, then
Yeah.
like he's an older duck man too. Like she's like
Yeah.
supposed to be like barely in her 20s or whatever. That would make him like, if he was a hippie, then that would
Yeah, he's like a 40-year-old.
he's a middle-aged like duck man who's like also like it's so many levels of weirdness and just kind of like, ugh, I don't
No
know.
matter where you go with it, it's not good.
It's not worth.
Well, it's funny too. Just even speaking in Sonic terms, unrelated to the movie, this is just the actual character's backstory. Is because Sonic was specifically aimed to appeal to the American audience or market, which gave Sega of America, which was all Americans, kind of a weird amount of power over it, so that they could influence the Japanese designs. And when the Japanese version of Sonic, when they came up with him, it was like he was in love with a human female named Madonna, and the head of Sega America was just kind of like, no, like what? Like I don't want to sell this. This is weird.
Please
Can we
tell
get
me
rid
you
of
put that in Sonic 2.
Well, obviously, yeah,
And you do real Madonna. You just get Madonna to do it.
yeah.
Tickets sold.
I think that was. Now I'm thinking back. That was actually some of the context in which we would keep bringing up Howard the Duck that our director did not like hearing, is that we liked to crack jokes about him having like the hots on some
Right.
human character. When the safe bet is you just don't do any of that.
Don't do it.
I think you're right. The best way would have just to have been like, okay, they get in bed, the lights go out, let our imagination run wild. Like that's, if you're going to go in
Yes.
this direction, just do that. The way they tease it, will they or won't they, just makes it infinitely worse. But like even weirder is the way this scene ends, because we get this awkward thing between them and they're sort of behind this like screen or whatever, and then Tim Robbins just shows up like he has keys to her apartment or something. He just shows up, interrupts them while they're in this awkward almost getting it on scene, and he's brought with him Jeffrey Jones as Professor Jennings. We get the whole explanation here as to basically how Howard got brought into our world, which was because there's this big space laser that Jennings was testing out. I forget what it's called. It has a name. I can't remember. But he's been testing it out, and it accidentally shot off into space and pulled Howard to Earth. So that's how he got here. And Tim Robbins just happens to know the guy who was testing this space laser, Jeffrey Jones, who sadly has gone on to have a sort of shameful
Yeah.
Not good. Not good.
Not
Bringing
good
a whole
personal life.
grosser level of sexual grossness. We won't get into it, but
Nope.
I actually think he's pretty good in this movie. I mean,
there was a point in my life where I feel like I remembered every single thing that happened in this movie, but that was now so long ago that really all I remembered is I very vividly remember all the opening Duck World stuff.
yeah.
I thought that was slightly more of the movie than it was based on how well I remembered it. That's basically just the opening credits. And then every other thing I remember from this movie is Jeffrey Jones related. Like that was, I think, the parts of the movie I really, really liked when I was a kid. I mean, in part, I think they're some of the weirder, freakier stuff in a good way, but also I think it's just because I love him in not Back to the Future, Ferris Bueller's Day Off so much.
Mm-hmm.
And his performance is very out of control in this film.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, he kind of steals the movie. I mean, in a way.
I was amazed at how late he comes into it, though. Watching it this time, I'm like, where's Jeffrey Jones? That's like all I remember about this movie.
Well, and I had sort of forgotten that, he sort of starts off as a sympathetic character and then becomes a not sympathetic character. But then at the end, he's sort of back as a sympathetic character. So...
Mm-hmm.
Because, what we learn here is this space laser is shot off into space, and basically they need to go to the lab because they think they can reverse the laser and send Howard back to his home world. But then what happens is they go to the lab and the laser has exploded. We get a David Paymer cameo here.
Gotta have some David Paymer.
Gotta throw him in
somewhere
there
in your movie
as one of the scientists. Yeah, the laser has exploded, and what we will find out here is that it's brought an evil extraterrestrial entity down into it, and it has inhabited Jeffrey Jones. So he becomes the villain of the movie. But the weird thing that happens in this scene is, so we go to the lab and the lasers explode and everything, and it's like the cops show up and they basically just go after Howard. I mean, was there a reason why they were arrest that duck?
No, because he's just a duck. I think it's like and they think he's like
he's
wearing
weird, get him.
And he's different. No, but he's like they think he's wearing a costume, and then that's all weird. The cops are like stripping him down to his little boxers. It's just like
he's like in his boxers, and you see his like little duck knees sort of trembling. So one of those shots that makes you feel weird.
It's weird, but the cops are completely like they're acting like the explosion and all of this is Howard's fault. Like he's the problem. Yes. And he's like, I just showed up here. Howard's like, I just got here.
Yeah, the cops are immediately like after Howard and sort of remain so for the whole movie, just to sort of add an extra sort of antagonistic force against Howard, I guess, but it's unnecessary. I mean, at this point in the movie, I feel like hijinks need to ensue, so we're sort of at that part in the movie where it's got to be chases and set pieces and stuff, and at this point I kind of the fun of it starts to wane for me a little bit. I imagine like this is where your friends, Josh, were like feeling the pacing.
I think my friends were like that almost immediately.
Maybe I'm ascribing too much love for the first half of the movie, but I definitely, this sort of middle second act section, I think gets a little bit tiresome.
Well, this is where it becomes very ticking clock. And it's interesting that this was the part of the movie that I think I liked the most. It's really the sequence of the movie I've remembered most vividly is just the prolonged diner set piece where Jeffrey Jones first kind of like aliens out. And I also realized, I shouldn't say I realized watching this, I knew this long ago, but it's part of what I like about it is there's something I just really love about 1980s well done, like this high-end ILM version of it, hand-drawn blue electricity.
Yes, it's a very specific,
very specific look
to that time. I feel like this movie kind of was the pinnacle of it.
Oh, so much of it. Like he's like just surrounded by it at all times after a certain point, basically. And I love the stupid voice he's doing once he becomes an alien.
Evil overlord. He becomes an evil overlord.
Let's talk about that scene because basically Jennings gets Howard and Bev out of the lab, and they get away in his car. And, we're sort of learning at this point that there's something has jumped inside Jennings. And he has this one line that was a real head scratcher, but I enjoyed, where he goes, "It's replicating and superseding all my internal organs." Like, that's a really vivid and weird description of what's going on.
Which Beverly says, like, well, pull over and use the restroom or something like that. She's like,
There's definitely a lot of that kind of like low end farce
Right.
in this section where there is something obviously wrong with him, but Howard and Beverly are just like so oblivious to him
Yes.
and just kind of keep having their own side conversations and kind of like half paying attention to him, even though he's starting to go full like Vincent D'Onofrio and Men in Black, where it's like, this is not a human anymore.
Yeah, the Vincent D'Onofrio in Men in Black is totally ripping off this performance.
Yeah.
100%.
And he also gets not quite Rick Baker, Vincent D'Onofrio, Men in Black makeup, but like I really like his, like, he looks very unpleasant and gross
Yeah.
once he's going like full freaky monster, where just sort of parts of his face are this like sickly white,
Yeah.
almost like his skull is pressing out too far.
and he's like peeling a little bit, like his skin's
Yeah.
kind of peeling, and he's just sweaty, and it looks like his yeah, it's like his face is like, his skin's too tight for his face. Like, it feels
Yeah.
like you're saying with the bones, like he's gonna like, feels like he's gonna like burst through at any moment.
Yeah.
Like, it's intense.
And yeah, they really didn't skimp on the makeup too, because like you can even see it in like, his gums. His gums look all gross because he's sort of gnashing his teeth a lot, and it's
Yeah.
like they really went all out, but in a subtle way. And I mean, the makeup sort of gets more extreme as it goes. But like they end up at this restaurant that I wrote down, a diner, which I wrote down as Joe Rogan's Cajun Sushi, but it was something else, right, Jen? It was
It was like Joe Roma's. I think it was Roma.
I think it would be good if Joe Rogan's opened up a Cajun sushi
Cajun
place.
sushi.
Jeffrey Jones really starts to take over here because they have this whole scene where they sit down to eat, and like this waitress who seems like a comedian who's really hoping this is going to be her big break.
Yeah.
know.
Like, yeah, and she's not bad. She's
No,
not
she's
bad.
fine. Yeah.
She could have been in a sitcom.
She really has a little moment here.
Yeah, but you can tell like she's putting her all into. She's like, they're gonna notice me. They're gonna notice me. And sadly, I don't think we ever see that actress again. So yeah, she's like bringing them food, and Howard freaks out about the eggs because that's cannibalism
Yes.
in duck world. Yeah, like we get this whole from Jeffrey Jones is this now inhabited by this creature called the Dark Overlord of the universe, or just the Dark Overlord for short. And we learn that he's going to summon his fellow Dark Overlords from the like negative zone or whatever they've been banished. And sort of to prove his power here, he shoots the mustard and ketchup with his like ILM laser eyes, which is pretty great.
Yep.
We're getting this kind of crazy Jeffrey Jones performance, but we're also getting the sort of plot backstory, what the villain in this movie is going to be and what's going to happen. And
this is where the phase where the movie where it's kind of like it just sort of breezes through till we get to the big, because this leads directly basically into the big chase back to the laser, right?
But before we get there, though, these rednecks come
Yeah.
over to their table.
Oh yeah, the big bar fight,
Yeah.
diner fight.
Yeah, we get the big diner fight here, and like they literally devolves into like a pie fight, and then at one point the rednecks bring Howard into the back room, the kitchen. They've got him down on the chopping block, and
They're seasoning him. They're gonna cook him.
yeah, he's like,
They're
they're
like-
seasoning me.
Yeah.
And so he's calling out to Beverly to help him, and Beverly has now been convinced that Jennings is the Dark Overlord, and she's trying to get him to help out Howard, which I don't know why. Oh, because Howard has the key.
Yeah.
Howard has like this MacGuffin key that
Yeah.
Jeffrey Jones needs.
For the laser. It's for the computer for the laser or something.
So that's how she convinces the Dark Overlord to help Howard. And so what he does is he starts like psychically like throwing like cleavers and stuff around the diner, and he's leveling the place with eye blasts and stuff. But then Beverly gets the key from Howard, and they escape. But the Overlord gets Beverly and drives off with her in the truck. Oh wait, at one point the Overlord like levitates Howard, which is another like moment where you feel bad for the little person. You can tell he probably spent days up on like a wires, like being levitated.
I'm forgetting the guy's name, but I think this was a very similar situation as Warwick Davis in Return of the Jedi, where they got like a really young little person. Like he was like a teenager or something at the time.
Well, I looked on IMDb and there was a lot of people who were listed.
I think some of those are more like stunt people.
Just stunt guys, so yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like for most of the, the acting, I think it was primarily this one guy.
But I mean, his like body movement and stuff in general
he's
is
good.
good. He's good in the suit. He's a good suit performer. That must have been really hot in that.
I just wonder how heavy the head was.
Oh, God.
With all the fucking motors in there and stuff.
He probably still has like neck problems because of it.
Yeah.
Poor guy. Anyway, so the Overlord has abducted Beverly, and they're driving off in a truck. At one point, like he needs to recharge his energy, so his tongue tentacle comes out and goes into the lighter,
cigarette lighter,
cigarette lighter, and rejuvenates him.
And he's not just driving a truck; it's a semi truck.
It's a semi truck.
Yeah, like I mean, just to up the ante, because it's this giant truck. He's not hauling anything, I don't think, but it's like the cab. It's like this big semi.
And basically what they do to sort of drive the plot forward at this point or to add more things in, is that he needs power. So like he stops off at a nuclear power plant because we were all really worried about that in the 80s.
Yep.
And he takes a tour, even though he looks like death warmed over. They're fine with him touring the plant. And like at one point, like I think he just like blasts his way into the reactor or whatever, and just like powers up with nuclear energy.
He's a total creep at the power plant too, of course. But like there's one part before he blasts through to get to the reactor or whatever, where he's just like up against the glass or whatever, and he's like, power. Yeah. And the people up in like the tour guides are like, hey, let's move it along,
right.
You know.
Yeah. He's pretty consistently great, like throughout all of this nonsense.
That's why I'm sad that he turned out to be so gross in real life, because
such a bummer.
I loved him in this era up through Beetlejuice, Mom and Dad Save the Universe, or whatever that's called.
He was doing good work
Solid.
right up until like the 2000s, before all the horrible news came out about him. And he was showing up and stuff. He was showing up in like Tim Burton
he was on
movies.
Deadwood.
Yeah.
But anyway, so at one point there's like this pointless checkpoint stop in the freeway, and then at this point his makeup is becoming more advanced. He's sort of got this like fright wig kind of look to him, and I think he kills a cop at one point.
Yeah, well, it's a ridiculous checkpoint stop. I think it's like a smog check or something, which is that's not how that works at all. Like anyone who knows, like who's been through smog check, that's not what a smog check is. But whatever. But yeah, he totally like he's super powerful now, and he like laser beams shoot out of his eyes again, the blue, creepy, crazy blue eyes, and he just like totally fries this cop, and Beverly's horrified. She's like, ah!
So yeah, he's basically a cop killer.
Yeah.
But what's going on simultaneously to this is that Phil and Howard have now been paired together because, they hate each other. So they've got to be which is kind of a weird thing, because now it's like this thing with Phil and Howard, where it's like one thing that I appreciated about Sonic is about the relationship between him and James Marsden. And that's like the whole movie, and it's like Sonic wants a friend, and he's his friend, so it's very clear cut. My problem with this structurally is like, we only care about Howard's creepy relationship with Beverly.
Yes.
We don't care about his adversarial relationship with Phil. We don't need this to turn into like a buddy bad
Yeah.
buddy cop movie kind of scenario in this last part of the movie. It's not what we're here for. But like they find this ridiculous, like, I don't even know what these things are called. It's like a bicycle airplane. Like, is there an actual term for what this thing is?
I don't know.
Funny thing is, and this didn't come out, like, it was like 15 years after this, and now I'm brain farting what it's even called. Maybe like Fly Away. I feel it was like a documentary, like one of those really well shot documentaries that was about somebody who had one of these bicycle plane, but that was using it to go like hang out with like migrating birds. Do you guys remember that movie?
Yes.
It was like very late 90s.
Fly Away Home, I think it's called, isn't it?
It is.
called?
Oh, Fly Away Home.
I believe
yeah,
that's
I
what
was
it's
thinking
called.
Fly Away, but yeah.
It's called an
so-
ultralight aircraft, just
There
so
you
we
go.
know. I looked it up. Okay.
But it was funny that now being post Fly Away Home and going back to this movie and be like, and it's still involving a duck. Although I think there were maybe geese in Fly Away Home.
Close enough. Same thing.
Yeah.
All the duck purists are getting really mad right now. They're not the same.
Racist.
But yeah, so basically this is all to set up this crazy aerial hijinks in this ultralight where the cops are chasing them on the ground, and it's and I remember as a teenager seeing this in the theater feeling like I don't think I was liking Tim Robbins very much, and like Tim Robbins sort of goes into full goofy mode where he's like hanging off the thing. They're sort of sniping at each other.
It's doubling down on the assumption that you're finding Tim Robbins hilarious. And if you do, then it all works.
Yes.
So I think that's why this is one of those parts I remembered from watching it as a kid, because I did like him in the movie.
Yeah. So it's basically the Jar Jar effect, where it's like,
Yeah.
like at the end of Phantom Menace, Jar Jar is doing all this crazy crap on, falling and hanging off of things and stuff like that. And it's hilarious if you're a kid, but if you're an adult like me, you're rolling your eyes.
Stabbing
So,
yourself
yeah,
in the
even
face.
as a teenager. But it's actually kind of cool in a way because they are really flying this thing around. Like they're
Well, which is why all old movies like this are just inherently better because you if nothing else, you're like, oh wow, they did that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a real dude
Exactly.
hanging upside down from that thing.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I just watched it, but I'm already forgetting. Is there a part where like Tim Robbins is upside down and his head is like hitting the water? Or am I
Yes. No, that
okay.
happens. That totally
Yeah.
happens because he's like totally sopping wet and he's like getting dunked in the water. And
Yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of shenanigans happening on the back where like Howard's finally like getting it to fly or whatever, and it's like he's not really paying attention to what he's doing to Tim Robbins.
But I mean, it is kind of like if you want to watch something with just a crazy ultralight thing flying around and landing on trucks and doing all sorts of
Yeah.
crazy crap, like
Yeah.
it is kind of impressive.
It delivers.
They had the money to make it work.
And the shots where you see like Tim Robbins and Howard like in sort of close-ups look good. Like I don't know if they're doing like back projection or blue screen or whatever, but they actually look pretty convincing. They may have just had them like on like a gimbal or something and drove them around.
Yeah, I feel, this is a George Lucas movie. They're doing whatever's the
High tech at the time.
Well, I guess not even high tech, but like the version that you needed to actually spend money to do,
Yeah. Right.
which was possibly just having some sort of moving crane that they were safely sitting in, so they could just kind of get the things moving in the background behind them.
Yeah, I mean the money is there on screen. You can't call this thing a cheap piece of crap. It's like an expensive piece of crap.
Which and I think that's the irony, because like if this had been a dumpy Roger Corman movie, I feel like it would be remembered as this like amazing classic for like that type of a movie.
Yeah.
Because it is filled with all those outrageous ideas, and obviously Corman would have pushed the inappropriate relationship like further, so it would have been an adult movie, and it would have just been this example of like what a fucking crazy ass movie.
Yes.
Rather than a notorious stinker of the 80s.
But I kind of like it in the way it is. Like I like the expensive version, and I'm glad it is.
Well, yeah, that's it's great as an audience member when somebody blows a lot of money on something just like absurd. We all get to enjoy it, but and granted, Lucas was not in a place where this was really gonna impact his career, but it impacted the writers and directors.
I'm sure somebody was putting teeth marks in a shotgun when they saw like, the numbers for this roll in. Somebody was super bummed at the way this bombed. So Phil and Howard make their way to the lab. They crash into a pond with the ultralight, and Howard can't swim. They go into the lab and, sort of classic villain style, like tying the heroin up on the railroad tracks. The Dark Overlord has like Beverly tied like right underneath the laser because he's going to shoot it into space and bring more Dark Overlords, but specifically one to inhabit her body because they have to inhabit a human host to gestate here on Earth.
Sure.
We'll go with
fine.
that.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It puts her in danger. So we get the big sort of showdown set piece here. Basically, Phil and Howard have to get this disintegrator gun or something, which is on like this, like, I don't know, 6-wheel vehicle. And so they just kind of drive that around and try to shoot Jeffrey Jones, and, ILM lightning bolts are going all around him and he's firing back at them and whatever. It's sort of this just battle between them while Jeffrey Jones is still in monster makeup. Now, I always remembered, because we've seen this happen in so many movies since, like this has become a thing where the villain is in human form for most of the movie and then becomes a big monster at the end. I had remembered that Jeffrey Jones like changed into the Dark Overlord, but that is not what happens. There's an explosion and Jeffrey Jones gets separated from the Dark Overlord, and the Dark Overlord now he's a stop motion animated creature. Is this Phil Tippett?
Yeah, this was Phil Tippett.
Now, I love this monster. I actually think this monster
looks so great.
I love it. And I remember even thinking when I saw it, I was like, damn, that monster at the end, they delivered with that thing. Like, I thought it was super cool. I remember thinking then, like, is this stop motion? Because it looked so much smoother than stop motion had up to that point. Like, I think there was some sort of, I mean, it's Lucasfilm, so there had to be some sort of technological advance or something. But, like, it looked way better than the Rancor did in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, well, I don't remember if Tippett himself was involved with, I think it was called Go Motion, which I think the Rancor was one of the first things they used it on.
Right.
Where the camera would the armatures were slightly roboticized, so they would jerk ever so slightly during the like one frame to create the idea of a motion blur. And I think they'd probably just been perfecting that. And it's just funny because like to me, this and Willow have a lot in common of these movies that Lucas was getting made off his Star Wars Indiana Jones clout.
Yeah.
And I think Willow is more fondly remembered by more people than Howard the Duck, but they were both kind of like, they didn't do well.
Yeah.
And both of them, though, had like really awesome stop motion. Phil Tippett might even have been the one on Willow, which is more random in Willow. There's just this one random scene where they're being attacked by this like multi-headed.
Yeah, it's at the end at the castle. There's a big multi-headed dragon or something.
But I do like that was just kind of part of the Lucas formula for these movies. We're going to have our awesome stop motion monster scene.
Well, it's a formula that has been continued, not with stop motion, but like how many movies now end with the villain becoming a giant
big
CG creature? Like to me, this felt like the first one of those that I remember seeing. Like whenever that happens in a movie, I like consciously or subconsciously go right back to Howard the Duck. Like I really do. It's like, oh, it's the Howard the Duck ending. Yeah, and like what you're saying about the stop motion and the blur, I think that's what it was. It felt more alive to me because because of this advance in technology. I remembered it really interacting a lot with like the set and stuff, but it kind of doesn't. I was watching it more closely, and You can see
Yeah,
this.
more just like it like tries to grab them with its weird pincher scorpion tail
Yeah.
and misses and stuff. Oh wait, does it have a pinching tail? It has like claws.
Pincher
It's like a
claws. It's
weird
pinchers.
crab scorpion thing.
Well, it opens up its claws and like tentacles shoot out of the palm.
Well, it's the same thing that like shot out to get the energy earlier too. It's
Right.
like that same type thing. Yeah.
Yeah, at one point it like snags Howard around the leg, and then Jeffrey Jones, who's now separated from the monster, like gives him a saw to cut off the tentacle that's grabbed
Yes.
his leg.
Yes. Circular saw he tosses to him. Yeah.
And this green goo spills out of the severed tentacle. But yeah, so it's just a big monster fight basically, and Howard ends up getting the disintegrator and he blows up the Dark Overlord, but then he kills the Dark Overlord, but then he's got to make the choice because there are more Dark Overlords coming through the boom tube, and we get like this pretty hilarious shot of like them coming through the boom tube. And so Howard's got to make the choice. If he blows up which isn't really a choice if you think about it, because like, sure, the laser cannon will still be there, but the Dark Overlords are going to get in and they're going to just kill everyone every way. So it's not really like Howard's going to get to use
it's not that selfless or heroic. Yeah, I feel like because once they showed up, well, he doesn't know how to use it. How is he going to go back?
Right. Like they'll just come in and destroy it or whatever so that they never have to leave. So it's not like they're just going to invade Earth and be like, oh no, cool, go ahead and use it to go home, Howard. But it's sold as this big moment where he's choosing to stay on Earth, and he blows up the laser, and they have this sort of unnecessary, like, is Howard dead moment where because the laser blows up, he's sort of sitting in the rubble, and Beverly goes over to him, and sort of like a love scene, but not really. It's just pointless. And then he wakes up and he's not dead.
No, it's just he wakes up and he's got jokes. He's like, Howard is no longer here, or whatever, like the stuff that like Jeffrey Jones was doing,
Yes,
that he like
I am the Dark Overlord.
Yeah.
That's a nice
It's
moment.
cute. It's cute.
Good joke. Yeah, so I mean that's the big finale, the big special effects finale.
I could easily imagine that watching it again now, I'd be like, oh, these look kind of lame. I'd like improved upon them in my memory over the years. But if anything, they looked even better than I remembered.
Yeah, I really was surprised how well they held up. I mean, you can sort of tell a little, there's, compositing, slight discoloration, not to get too nerdy, but the Dark Overlord creature looks slightly lighter.
Or just their animation was so good.
Yeah. You can definitely see the seams, but I think it actually kind of holds up and is sort of a refreshing to watch in this day of perfect CG all the time. But yeah, so that's basically it, except we end on like a big time rock concert because Howard has taken over Cherry Bomb as manager, and now they are hugely successful and playing like in some sort of arena to a big crowd. And they've also brought along Filzy as like he's working the stage effects or something, which, just seems like a recipe for disaster, which it turns out it is.
Filzy.
Because Howard gets like accidentally thrown out on stage, but they give him this like little kind of guitar and he starts doing some serious shredding, which as a guitar shredder myself, I appreciated. He throws in some like Jimi Hendrix licks and stuff, but
Well, that was a Back to the Future
Yeah.
similarity.
it's almost
Yeah.
exactly. It's so,
Yeah.
so there's some echoes in this movie of Back to the
I
Future.
feel like
It's
he's
kinda
almost
weird.
dressed the same
Yes,
as Michael
yeah.
J. Fox
That's-
in that scene.
Totally. He's got like a suit on and he's kind of doing some of the same
moves. No, they're like hopping across the stage. He and Leah Thompson are.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, there's some trivia about who could have been Beverly that I can't not share.
Sure. Go ahead.
Because
All
it's
right.
like I was reading through the list of who it could have been, and they all made sense. Like it's like Paula Abdul, Kim Basinger, Sarah Jessica Parker, Phoebe Cates.
Paula Abdul.
I know. Yeah, I mean it's the time, I guess.
No, this was before her. This would have been.
Yeah, like She was just a Lakers girl.
No, but she was a dancer.
She was a
like,
dancer.
definitely
Yeah.
a dancer and choreographer. So I mean, anyway, but yeah. So none of these, I was like, yeah, okay, I could see it, whatever. And they even said like Belinda Carlisle was considered, or
Yeah,
she
I
had
could see
auditioned,
that.
so I could see that. But you know who I could not see, and I don't think anyone could have
Olivia
seen.
Dukakis.
Close.
Ah,
Tori Amos.
Oh my God.
Can you
Wow.
imagine? Tori Amos auditioned for the part of Beverly. Can you even imagine this with
how
Tori
old
Amos?
was she?
I mean, she's probably the same age as Leah Thompson, I would think.
Yeah?
Probably.
Huh.
I mean, she's probably, maybe a little bit younger, but I would think around the same age.
That would have been so mind-bogglingly weird.
I wonder how her music career would have progressed if everyone was aware that she'd been in
Howard the Duck.
She dodged a bullet there for sure. I think definitely considering like the seriousness of her music and career, it would not have been beneficial to have had Howard the Duck in her past. It would have been really
No.
detrimental to her.
It's
career.
hard to just like come off of that and have everyone because like
It's fine if you're Leah Thompson because she's a comedian. You know what I
oh,
mean?
no,
Oh,
I
yeah,
meant
yeah.
like trying to become a serious
Right.
like musician. Like I feel like Jenny Lewis with Rilo Kiley. If everyone had vividly remembered that she was the kid from The Wizard,
Right.
and that was more of like a fun fact after you had already heard them.
Yeah.
And then someone would be like, she was in this movie you've never heard of, average person. But I feel like Hard to Duck was like very high profile for a failure.
Yeah.
Everyone knew Howard the Duck existed. That wasn't, even if you didn't see it, it wasn't like it slipped below your radar.
Right. It's like cultural saturation was heavy, even though it was like a
And
failure.
I'm sure all the late night talk shows hosts were cracking jokes about it. And like it wasn't quite an Ishtar level bomb, but I think it was definitely seen as like, oops, George Lucas,
Yeah.
what'd you do?
No, I just was trying to think because I don't even. You were talking about what Jenny Lewis is in The Wizard. I don't even know what.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Well, it's a movie about
It's a Nintendo movie,
Oh.
basically.
Fred Savage is like a kid
Oh!
who plays video games.
yes,
and like
yes.
it's
Yeah.
like a road.
But it's Rain Man. It's Rain Man with children, where Fred Savage's like little brother who's on the spectrum.
Yep.
And is like an amazing video game player. They're like traveling to play. It was how they introduced Super Mario Brothers 3 to the world. Was you see them playing it at the end of the movie.
And the Power Glove, right? Wasn't
The
that?
Power Gloves. Best scene in that movie is when they meet the super cool kid who's showing off his Power Glove. But that's sort of my point, was that like no one remembered that movie. And also she was a little kid in it. So
Yeah.
it wasn't even like you'd recognize her
Yeah.
10 years later as the little girl from that movie. But everyone knew Leah Thompson was Howard the Duck.
Totally.
Well, it probably kept her on a comedy path because I think comedy forgives these things very easily. Like,
Yeah.
as long as if you're a funny person, it's funny. It doesn't matter. But I mean, Tim Robbins survived and went on to prosper. And
No, I think probably really. I think the writer-directors took a hit, and George Lucas didn't take a hit in that like his career ended, because
No.
obviously it didn't. But I do think this and Willow and like Radioland Murders, like this was the era where people were kind of like, oh, so slapping George Lucas's name on something doesn't make people go see it.
yeah.
Unless it's a Star Wars movie. And even that's not true, because they did like 13 Land Before Time movies.
Yeah.
Him and Spielberg and Don Bluth. But I guess it showed that there was some fallibility to him. You can imagine being a studio exec after the 1-2 punch of Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was like another movie people didn't really want to make. That's just kind of like, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so George Lucas has an idea. It makes $1 gazillion and everyone loves it.
Just one last thing I want to bring up, just because it's something I feel deeply in my heart, and that is I really like the song "Howard the Duck" that they
Oh, yeah.
play at the end.
Howard
That
the
duck. I find it really catchy and sing it to myself. I do wish the quack was a little more pronounced in it, because they just kind of do like a synthesized. But I wanted like a. If I was mixing that, I'd be like, no. We got to really bring in a quack.
This is a full-on quack.
Yeah, Howard the Duck. quack. Needed to be in there. So that's Howard the Duck. Now, do we even need to ask ourselves why it failed? I
Nope.
mean,
Yeah.
Nope.
well, let me ask you this, Josh. Having seen Howard the Duck again this time, do you feel, how did you enjoy yourself watching it this time?
Yeah, I very much enjoyed it, and I'm glad they made it so that because I loved it as a kid. Definitely putting on my like producer hat. I couldn't help but, like I said, like I feel the Roger Corman version of this, which would not have had amazing Phil Tippett animation at the end. I mean, actually, I take that back. If they could have made this before Phil Tippett was famous and they just plucked him out of like art school, as Corman was famous for doing, maybe he could have gotten some stuff, but he wouldn't have had the money for it.
Yeah.
But so a lot of the stuff we were praising about the movie, like how good the suit was, wouldn't have been good in the Corman version.
Yeah.
But I just feel like this, just the inherent weirdness of the storyline and just like what it was going for, this movie really could have worked if it was a smaller movie. Because even with Sonic, that was the thing, is everyone really wanted to make sure the movie was cheap for that kind of movie.
Yeah.
It was still obviously expensive, especially when talking about the idea of like a Corman movie. But it was like just comparing it to Detective Pikachu.
Yeah.
Because Detective Pikachu also made a lot of money, but it cost twice as much as Sonic, which is, I think, why we have not at least yet seen a Detective Pikachu 2.
Yeah.
Which doesn't say it couldn't happen because people liked it. You know, kind of like Hellboy 2 didn't really make enough money that a sequel was, or Hellboy 1 didn't make enough money that a sequel was just a no-brainer, and it was greenlit on like opening weekend.
Yeah.
It was just because people liked Hellboy, so they did, and it made enough money. I think that's kind of the Detective Pikachu situation, where Sonic thankfully was cheap enough that the amount of money it made for Paramount, it was just like, well, obviously we're making
Yeah.
a sequel, just figure out what it is, which is a cool place to be. But Howard was just kind of doomed, because I think it would have had to do so well, and I don't see what the audience was for it, because as you even noted, you're kind of not sure why you saw it
Yeah.
as a teenager. Granted, I think if people weren't, we didn't have social media and Rotten Tomatoes, so I think a lot of people would see a movie based on just what they assumed it was going to be, and they would be horribly disappointed when they I bet that was probably it for you and your friends. You're like, oh, George Lucas, oh, based on that Howard the Duck comic or whatever, sure.
And I think on some level we kind of knew it was going to be a train wreck. So I think there was a certain amount of irony. We were old enough that irony might have been a factor, but I can't really remember, so I can't really say. But it was definitely, yeah, George Lucas. It looks insane, that kind of thing.
Cute Leia Thompson. Like
Cute
she
Leia
had-
Thompson
yeah.
for sure.
I really enjoyed it. Like I said, I haven't seen it since I was a young kid. And it's very, there were things that I had remembered from when I was a kid that I was like, when you and I were talking about this, I was like, yeah. And then I remember this was kind of weird. And so I had some sort of clue back then that things were a little weird, but I still enjoyed it. But seeing it now and getting to really see how tonally weird it is was, just seeing it with different eyes, but still really enjoying it. And there's good stuff there, and it's fun. And, like I said earlier, I fucking love puns, and it's just pun central, and just all the duckery and just, yeah, it's just fun. Like, I found myself, and you were chuckling too throughout it. Like, we're watching it and you were chuckling too.
Despite myself, honestly, I wasn't even
Yeah.
really. I actually found myself genuinely amused
Yes.
by some of the jokes, which
That's what I'm saying.
it's hard to amuse me, as you know.
No, and especially like you like, I'm always like so hyped about puns. I'm ridiculous about it, and you're just like, ugh, like constantly rolling your eyes, and you were actually like enjoying all these duck puns.
Well, you got to give yourself over to it if you're going to
Yeah.
watch it. Like if you're like, I cannot stand a duck pun, then you definitely should not be watching this. Like, why are you watching this movie?
It's
If you
not
have
the film
any-
for you.
No, like, okay, here's my feelings. Like watching it again, I expected it to be much more painful to watch than it was. I actually found it to be pretty enjoyable. My problems with do I think it's a good movie? No, it's not a good movie. I even think just from a basic storytelling aspect, it's not really well told. As Josh pointed out, the pacing is weird. You don't know what to feel half the time, really. And if you
I don't. Yeah, I don't think you don't care if he gets home.
No,
like it's
not
not
at
that kind
all.
of story. It's just kind of things are happening. It's almost a surprise when you get to the Jeffrey Jones portion of the movie, because the first half is so aimless.
Yeah.
That you're just kind of like, oh, and now we need to rush. We need to rush to the thing, to the place before this happens, kind of story.
Yeah.
That wasn't set up at all in Act One,
No, and it's like, yeah, you're right. You're not. It's no ET. You're not invested in him getting home.
Yeah.
You don't care about that. The relationship between him and Beverly makes you feel really weird and uncomfortable. There's a general amiability to everything, and I think Howard is kind of a fun character. I mean, he's a fun character. You like him. He's got attitude, and certainly, I mean, your mileage may vary as to how old you are or whatever, but he's an enjoyable character to sort of follow around. And Leah Thompson is cute and fun, and Tim Robbins is like the comic relief, and he's good if you like Tim Robbins. So, I mean, there's plenty here to enjoy, but in terms of like investing you in a story, it completely fails, like in that way. Like you don't really care about anything that's going on. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's any mystery why it failed, because as Josh and as we've pointed out many times on the show, it almost always comes back to, who is this for? Furries maybe might get a little mileage out of this movie.
Maybe.
You know what? I did think about that while watching this, wondering how the furry community, how this lives for them.
Yeah.
It's got to be I don't want to say it's a classic, but it's funny because Sonic, that whole franchise, not the movie franchise, but just before the movie, is apparently huge in the furry franchise.
That makes
just
sense.
Like all the different characters.
I have to imagine this is a movie of significance to the furries. I don't want to speak for the furries because I don't really know what they think, but I have to think that this movie is on their radar.
The fact that it is so overtly furry, maybe that's unappealing. I'm not sure.
We should have gotten a furry on.
Yeah.
Well, this is the time to invite any furries that would like to be represented to send an email.
I know people I suspect of being furries, but I don't know anybody who admits to it. So I don't actually know any furries.
Wait, I looked it up because I was curious, because we keep kind of alluding to it. So the budget of this movie was around $37 million,
Which was a
which
ton.
in 1986 dollars was gigantic.
Yes.
Because I remember just a couple years later, Who Framed Roger Rabbit at that time was like the most expensive movie ever made, and that was like low 40s. And just the whole, I mean, there was so much more they needed to spend money on that. Like they were inventing technology for that movie. So it cost around $37 million and it made 38.
Right, which is terrible.
Yeah.
And is that worldwide?
That's Wikipedia, and I feel like their budget summaries on that are usually worldwide.
Yeah.
Because I've looked up a lot of movies that I thought were bombs, and I'm like, oh, that actually did pretty good. And then I look it up elsewhere, and I'm like, oh, that was the worldwide total. Like, that's still super tanked.
I would recommend anybody watch the movie, just because if you haven't seen Howard the Duck and you're a fan, I mean, I think if you're a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog, the movie, I think you owe it to yourself to watch Howard the Duck and see how far we've come.
And despite the failure of that previous time I watched it after hyping it up to friends, watching it this time I was like, no, I was right.
Yeah.
Like,
Fuck them.
I feel like if I invited over a bunch of people and we were just like drinking beer and watching this like late at night, because it's also the kind of perfect movie to be like half talking over with your friends, because the pacing is and like you don't really care what's happening, so you can kind of just only be appreciating how utterly insane it is that this movie got made. And actually, I'm thinking about so it made like whatever number I said, 38 million. That still means a lot of people saw this movie. The problem was just that it was so expensive that it needed to be like an ET level hit
Yeah.
to turn a profit.
I remember the reaction to it being
Yeah,
pretty
people
toxic.
thought it was terrible.
Yeah, it was a laughing stock, and because I remember feeling like it wasn't that bad, but yeah.
But like if anyone has recently seen the Garbage Pail Kids movie, they understand though how good Howard the Duck is.
Yeah.
Because while Garbage Pail Kids is also like that's hilarious to watch in like a Doug Benson Interruptions scenario with a packed audience of people who are high and just like laughing at it and whatever. But like that movie's borders on unwatchable. Like it is so bad. So Howard the Duck is pretty good. Like it's just, I feel bad that it has such a terrible reputation. My wife and I recently rewatched the movie Ishtar, which I feel like if you're of a certain age and pay attention to movies, like that was the big punchline, huge bomb movie.
Yeah.
Because that was also like tied up in like movie star egos. Because that's just like a comedy. This is Howard the Duck at least has awesome special effects.
Yeah.
Ishtar, for those who don't know, is just a Warren Beatty, Dustin Hoffman comedy. Like they went to like Africa and there's like a couple explosions in it, but like it's a movie that should not have cost much of anything.
Yeah.
And it was also one of the most expensive movies ever made when it came out. Watching that one, I'm like, this movie is not good. It's like way too long. Most of the jokes are horrible. That one at least does know its audience. It's aimed at adults, and it's just like comparing those, I'm like, Howard the Duck should not be remembered as one of the great turkeys of the 1980s. Because it mostly works. Worse, I was gonna say it's worse than Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but it's not like that much worse,
As a guy who's not really a Turtles guy, I would probably take it over Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Oh, interesting.
Although I don't disagree. I agree with you that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles technically is a better movie.
And I think that movie works because it fully understands what audience it's aiming
Right.
at and goes for it.
Yes.
And like it hits that mark. As we've said numerous times, Howard's just kind of like it's confused.
Well, and I think, and I'm not a Turtles person either, but I believe if I remember from the cartoon, there is a human female in, okay,
Yes.
and so none of the turtles are getting weird with her.
No.
So there's that.
And even if they're kind of like acting like, oh wow, whatever, she's so pretty, she's not into them.
Yeah.
That's kind of the key component
Right.
Yeah.
that I think makes things weird, but also so fascinating about Howard. But
It is fascinating. I think that's how I would describe Howard the Duck.
yeah,
It's fascinating.
I fully think it is a fascinating movie.
And it's an enjoyable movie. Like I was happy to watch it again. Will I watch it again someday? Probably, but it will probably be another, decade from now.
I never thought I would, but now I'm like, I bet I'll watch this again in like 10 years.
There's some good stuff there. There is. The effects and, I'm with Sebastian. Like, I really enjoy the first act. I enjoy Howard trying to acclimate to life on Earth and poor Howard getting a hot tub fever. I could watch like a whole segment more of that, like his life at the hot tub fever, the gross sex spa, or what other jobs he gets into. I don't know. I'm here for that part too. It's a good
The movie
time.
was like just one hair away from him, like being the boom operator on a porno shoot or something. Like,
Yeah, that would have been the next thing we had to do after Hot Tub Fever.
That's where you go after hot tub fever.
yeah.
Josh, we're all excited for Sonic 2. We know that
Thank
Woo!
you.
Yeah.
you and Pat turned in the script.
Start shooting in like 3 weeks.
That's
Awesome.
insane. Wow.
Yay.
Fast tracking that shit.
Yeah. Up in Vancouver, where thankfully they took COVID a little more seriously
Good.
early on.
Good.
So
All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna go practice my quack foo and hit
all
my
right.
hit my shift at Hot Tub Fever.
Yeah. I was gonna say I'm gonna go bust out my issue of Play Duck.
I need to go fish some duck condoms out of the hot tub.
Ew.
that about does it today for Tentpole Trauma. If you like what you heard, check out our social media presence on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Just look for Tentpole Trauma. That was easy, wasn't it? If you like us, hit subscribe and leave us a sterling review on iTunes, if you dare. If you really like us, head over to patreon.com and get involved in one of our fabulous tiers. You'll be glad you did. Want to communicate with Tentpole Trauma? Send an email to tentpoletrauma@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. And who knows, one day you may even get your email read on one of our shows. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll see you real soon.